What happens when a film about love becomes something governments fear? Across the world, some of the most powerful stories ever told were cut, muted, or banned, not because of violence or politics, but because they dared to show love in a way that didn't fit old rules. From Oscar winners to global blockbusters, these films sparked outrage, protests, and sometimes quiet revolutions. Let's travel across borders and decades to uncover 15 countries that banned queer classics and the real reasons why. Number 15, Brokeback Mountain, 2005. China, Malaysia, and the United Arab Emirates. It wasn't just a movie about two men on a mountain, it was a cultural earthquake. When Brokeback Mountain premiered, audiences everywhere were stunned by its quiet power. Two cowboys torn between love and the lives they were expected to live. Ang Lee's masterpiece swept through the Oscars, yet in countries like China, Malaysia, and the United Arab Emirates, the film never made it to theaters.
My mom used to say that to me when I was little.
In China, the film's themes were labeled morally problematic, and state media refused to promote it, despite Ang Lee being one of their own. Officials claimed it violated cultural values. In Malaysia, censors went further, stating that the movie's content cannot be approved for public exhibition. Even edited versions were refused release.
Time to get going, cowboy.
The UAE's decision was simpler. They banned it outright, declaring it contradictory to public ethics. What made the reaction so sharp was Brokeback's realism. It didn't rely on shock, it relied on silence, longing, and honesty. That emotional intimacy terrified boards built on censorship. Ironically, the bans only fueled curiosity. Pirated DVDs flooded black markets across Asia, and underground screenings became acts of quiet defiance.
But you didn't want it, Ennis. So what we got now is Brokeback Mountain.
Years later, critics in banned regions would write essays calling it the most important love story of the century, one that was too human to be hidden. Brokeback Mountain wasn't just banned for what it showed, it was banned for what it made people feel. Number 14, Call Me By Your Name, 2017, Egypt and Malaysia. It was sun-drenched, slow, and romantic, and somehow that made it dangerous. When Call Me By Your Name premiered, critics hailed it as a masterpiece of emotion. Timothée Chalamet and Armie Hammer delivered performances that felt timeless.
Oh, I can go. I'm not doing anything today.
But in Egypt and Malaysia, it was treated like a threat. Egypt's censorship board refused to issue a screening permit, labeling it inconsistent with moral norms. The decision came after social media protests from conservative groups who called for a national boycott before the movie even opened.
You just get to watch two human beings fall in love with each other, and it's
Who wouldn't fall in love with this guy right here?
In Malaysia, the censorship board demanded extensive edits to tone down what it called inappropriate intimacy. When the distributor refused, the release was canceled entirely. What truly unnerved officials wasn't a single scene, it was the tone. The story wasn't about rebellion or outrage. It was about tenderness and vulnerability. And for many governments, that humanized portrayal was exactly what they didn't want audiences to see. Online fans fought back. Egyptian film clubs organized secret viewings, and Malaysian streaming users circulated fan-made subtitles of the film when official access was denied. Critics in banned regions later said the censorship revealed more about those societies' fear of emotion than the film's content itself. Today, Call Me By Your Name remains a symbol of beauty that governments tried and failed to erase. The irony? Every ban made more people want to watch it. Number 13, Blue is the Warmest Color, 2013. Lebanon, Singapore, and Tunisia. Few films have ever caused such a divide between praise and prohibition. When Blue is the Warmest Color won the top prize at the Cannes Film Festival, audiences called it one of the most honest depictions of young love ever made. Yet within weeks, several countries, including Lebanon, Singapore, and Tunisia, banned it completely.
Combien de m'appeler? Promis. Ok.
Lebanon's General Security Office stated the film was against public morals. In Singapore, censors said it exceeded classification guidelines, effectively blocking its release. Tunisia's Ministry of Culture followed suit, labeling it offensive to traditional values. None of these countries mentioned violence or language. Their only issue was that the film told a love story between two women.
Et plus. Ça marche.
Ironically, the director Abdelatif Kechiche was born in Tunisia, the very country that banned his work. Internationally, the movie became a cultural flashpoint, acclaimed for its emotion, condemned for its frankness. But what made it powerful was its tenderness, not its controversy. In banned regions, pirated copies circulated online with secret fan communities analyzing the story as a work of truth. Critics argued that the film wasn't about identity, it was about discovering oneself through love. Years later, even as bans remain in place, universities across the Middle East have used blue as the warmest color in lectures about artistic freedom. A film once locked away became a quiet lesson in courage, the kind that grows stronger every time someone tries to silence it. Number 12. Carol, 2015. China. It was elegance, restraint, and longing, three things that somehow became too much for one of the world's biggest film markets. Carol, directed by Todd Haynes, told the story of two women in 1950s New York whose connection defied the world around them. Kate Blanchett and Rooney Mara gave performances so subtle they spoke louder than dialogue. The film earned global acclaim, but in China it vanished before it arrived. The Chinese censorship authority never officially explained why Carol was banned, but insiders in the film industry admitted the reason was sensitive subject matter.
Because it's, you know, when you make a film, you're often quite dislocated.
The irony was glaring. The film featured no explicit content, just gazes, silence, and emotional restraint. Yet that quiet honesty was enough to make it disappear. Chinese audiences, however, found their own way. Fan translations, underground screenings, and hidden streaming links kept the film alive online. Viewers described it as a forbidden whisper that everyone heard anyway. Meanwhile, Western critics praised Carol for its delicacy, calling it the kind of film censors fear because it changes minds gently. What terrified gatekeepers wasn't rebellion, it was empathy. When a film makes people see love, not controversy, it challenges everything censorship is built on. Today, Carol is studied by Chinese film students as an example of banned art that quietly crossed borders anyway. Because you can ban a movie, but not the feeling it leaves behind. Number 11. The Danish Girl, 2015. Qatar and Oman. It was a film about identity, courage, and the search for truth, and for that, it was silenced. When The Danish Girl premiered, Eddie Redmayne's performance earned Oscar nominations and praise across the world. The film's story of self-discovery was based on real events, yet in Qatar and Oman, it was removed from theaters within days. Officials stated the movie violated media content standards. Local papers described it as unacceptable to the region's values. Even digital platforms in those countries pulled it from their libraries after social pressure. But what's remarkable is how audiences responded. In Qatar, hashtags defending the film began trending, with viewers arguing that art should be free to tell any human story. In Oman, underground film circles organized private screenings, with attendance growing through whispered invitations. For all its awards and prestige, The Danish Girl became something bigger, a test of how far empathy could travel when institutions tried to shut it down. Critics said the ban ironically gave the film new meaning. It wasn't just about one person's transformation, it became a mirror for entire societies grappling with their own fear of change. Years later, while the bans technically remain, The Danish Girl circulates freely online and in film schools across the world. A movie meant to honor courage ended up proving that courage exists not only on screen, but in every person who dares to watch it anyway. Number 10. Fire, 1996. India. It started as a simple domestic drama and ended with riots in the streets. Deepa Mehta's Fire was one of the first mainstream Indian films to show two women finding comfort in each other after being neglected by their husbands. It wasn't scandalous, it wasn't even explicit. But it broke an unspoken rule: love stories were allowed to challenge class, not tradition. When Fire premiered internationally, it was celebrated as a masterpiece of quiet rebellion. But when it opened in India in 1998, the reaction was explosive. Protesters stormed theaters, vandalized cinemas, and burned posters claiming the film. Disrespected Indian values. Screenings were halted and the government temporarily suspended the movie's license. Yet the story didn't end there. Feminist groups, film students, and ordinary citizens fought back demanding the movie be reinstated. Their message was simple: love is not an offense. After legal battles and media pressure, Fire was allowed to return to theaters with an adults-only rating. Still, many cinemas refused to show it out of fear. What made Fire so powerful was its honesty. It didn't shout, it spoke softly, and that was enough to shake an entire nation. Today, it's seen as the spark that ignited conversations about freedom, gender, and choice in modern Indian cinema. In the end, Fire wasn't just banned, it lit a fuse that still burns. Number 9. Bohemian Rhapsody, 2018. China and Malaysia. You can celebrate the music, but not the man that was the unspoken rule. When Bohemian Rhapsody hit theaters, it was a global phenomenon. The story of Freddie Mercury, Queen's legendary frontman, rocked audiences with nostalgia and emotion. But in China and Malaysia, it arrived heavily altered or not at all. Chinese censors approved the movie only after deleting key dialogue and scenes that hinted at Mercury's personal life. The edits were so severe that even his iconic line, "I'm not exactly straight," was removed. The result? A biopic about one of the most fearless artists in history, stripped of the very truth that defined him. In Malaysia, the film faced similar cuts, with officials stating that certain cultural sensitivities had to be respected. Critics called it a movie with holes where the heart should be. Fans, meanwhile, took matters into their own hands, sharing uncut versions online and holding private viewing events to honor Mercury's legacy as he truly was. What made the censorship especially ironic was that Bohemian Rhapsody won global awards for celebrating authenticity and self-expression. The very countries that celebrated Queen's music refused to acknowledge the man behind it. As one fan put it online, they wanted the voice, not the truth. Yet even in edited form, the film's energy was unstoppable. Audiences sang, clapped, and felt what they weren't allowed to see. And that's the thing about Queen: no amount of censorship can silence a chorus once it begins. Number 8. Moonlight, 2016. Malaysia. When Moonlight won Best Picture at the Academy Awards, it wasn't just a win, it was a moment that shifted cinema. Barry Jenkins's intimate coming-of-age drama told the story of a young man finding his place in a world that kept telling him who he should be. But in Malaysia, the film never saw a proper release. The censorship board declared it unsuitable for public viewing. The decision came as a shock to many because Moonlight isn't loud, it's tender. It's about identity, belonging, and the quiet moments that shape who we become. But that subtlety made it even more powerful, and that's precisely what made some authorities uncomfortable. Film critics in Malaysia noted that the country's film laws banned non-traditional relationships, effectively silencing stories like Moonlight. Even the film's trailer was blocked on several platforms, yet audiences still found ways to see it. Private screenings were held at universities and film clubs, shared encrypted links through chat groups. Despite being banned, Moonlight reached viewers in every corner of the world, often through whispers and courage. The irony: Malaysia had banned a movie that went on to make history as the first film with such a story to win Hollywood's highest honor. Years later, that decision looks even more out of step with reality, because when a film like Moonlight shines, once it keeps glowing, whether the screen is allowed to light up or not. Number 7. Love, Simon, 2018. India and the United Arab Emirates. It was supposed to be a feel-good teen movie, and that's exactly what made it dangerous. Love, Simon wasn't rebellious, political, or provocative. It was funny, warm, and heartfelt, a high school coming-of-age story that looked like every other Hollywood teen romance. But for censors in India and the UAE, that normalcy was the problem. The Central Board of Film Certification in India refused to approve its release, while the UAE banned it outright, citing content conflicts with media standards. Both countries avoided specifics, but the message was clear. They weren't ready for a love story that treated its characters as ordinary teens rather than stereotypes. Fans in India launched online petitions demanding its release, arguing that Love, Simon was exactly the kind of representation young people needed. Critics noted the irony. Foreign blockbusters filled with violence or chaos often passed untouched, but a film about kindness and honesty was deemed inappropriate. In the UAE, the ban drew international headlines, sparking debates on social media about censorship and generational change. Students began hosting private screenings, even projecting the film on walls in college dorms. What makes Love, Simon unforgettable is how gently it broke barriers. It didn't shock anyone, it invited them in. And that might be what scared authorities the most. The idea that millions could see themselves in a story where love looked completely normal. Number 6. Rocket Man, 2019. Russia and Samoa. When Elton John's life hit the big screen, the soundtrack wasn't the only thing that caused a stir. Rocket Man was bold, bright, and unapologetically personal, a musical journey through fame, loneliness, and finding acceptance. But in Russia and Samoa, it hit a wall before it could soar. In Russia, Paramount released a censored version that removed references to John's personal life and identity. Even his emotional confessions were edited down to sound vague or rewritten. The Russian Ministry of Culture said the cuts were made to comply with local laws. Elton John's response? He called it a sad reflection of an insecure society afraid of art. Meanwhile, Samoa banned the film completely, claiming it conflicted with cultural values. The country's censorship board insisted they were protecting moral standards, but fans saw it as a step backward. Despite all that, Rocket Man flew high. The censored version sparked outrage, with Russian critics walking out of theaters in protest. Fans later shared side-by-side comparisons online showing what had been erased. Ironically, the attempt to silence the movie gave it even more global visibility. In the end, the bans didn't dim Rocket Man's brilliance, they amplified it. Because when you try to cut out authenticity from an artist like Elton John, all you really do is make his voice louder. Number 5. Portrait of a Lady on Fire, 2019. Kuwait in Saudi Arabia. It was quiet, poetic, and painted in candlelight, and somehow that was enough to set off alarms. Céline Sciamma's Portrait of a Lady on Fire is one of the most visually breathtaking films of the century. Set in 18th century France, it tells the story of two women who fall in love while one secretly paints the other's portrait. The film won the Best Screenplay Award at Cannes and was hailed as a masterpiece of emotion. But in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, the film didn't just fail to reach audiences, it was erased from release schedules before it could premiere. The reason? Officials said it did not align with public values. Streaming platforms in those countries followed suit, quietly removing the title from their libraries. The irony is striking. Portrait of a Lady on Fire is not provocative, it's restrained, almost silent, a film built on glances, art, and the ache of time passing. Yet its message of freedom and equality terrified those who feared empathy. Internationally, the ban only fueled admiration. Fans in banned regions began circulating art inspired by the film. The image of one woman painting another became a symbol of hidden voices finding form. Critics called it cinema as rebellion through tenderness. Today, Portrait of a Lady on Fire stands as proof that gentleness can be powerful, that a whisper can echo louder than a shout. You can silence a screening, but not the emotion it leaves behind. Number 4. Milk, 2008. China. It was the story of a man who dared to step into politics not for power, but for pride. When Gus Van Sant's Milk debuted, it was more than just a biographical drama, it was a history lesson. Sean Penn portrayed Harvey Milk, one of the first openly gay elected officials in American history, and his fight for equality in the 1970s. The performance won Penn an Academy Award, but in China, the film never made it past the censors. Officials didn't issue a public explanation. They rarely do, but insiders in the film industry confirmed it was blocked for sensitive social themes. In other words, the film's political message of inclusion was seen as too risky. China had banned movies before, but Milk was different. It wasn't fiction, it was fact. The movie's absence was felt deeply among Chinese audiences hungry for more diverse stories. Online forums began trading pirated copies with Chinese subtitles, and discussions flourished about activism, visibility, and courage. Film professors quietly added Milk to academic libraries, describing it as a film that tells the truth no one else will. Internationally, Milk became a touchstone for human rights, but in countries like China, its silence spoke volumes. When people aren't allowed to see a story about someone fighting for fairness, the absence becomes its own kind of protest. Harvey Milk once said, "Hope will never be silent." The same could be said for his film. Number 3. The Power of the Dog, 2021. Qatar and Saudi Arabia. It looked like a Western, but it was really a mirror. Jane Campion's The Power of the Dog drew critical praise for its haunting storytelling and complex performances, especially Benedict Cumberbatch's portrayal of Phil Burbank, a man wrestling with identity under the weight of repression. The movie swept awards worldwide, but in Qatar and Saudi Arabia, it never made it to theaters. Officials labeled it inappropriate for regional audiences. The ban wasn't just about scenes or dialogue, it was about what the movie represented: vulnerability hidden beneath masculinity. Authorities feared that its emotional core, seeing strength and tenderness in the same frame, would challenge long-held ideas about what it means to be a man. Despite the bans, the film reached viewers through streaming networks and private viewings. Critics from banned regions admitted online that The Power of the Dog was unlike anything they'd seen, a Western that rides into your emotions instead of the sunset. The ban turned out to be the best publicity. International media spotlighted it, audiences in open markets watched it twice, and Jane Campion herself called it a story about control and who fears losing it. The irony couldn't be clearer. The film was banned for showing strength as something soft, and that's exactly what made it unforgettable. Number 2. Philadelphia, 1993, Singapore. It was one of the first mainstream films to talk about justice, humanity, and compassion, and yet it was silenced where it mattered most. When Philadelphia premiered, it marked a turning point for Hollywood. Starring Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington, the movie told the story of a lawyer fighting discrimination after being unfairly dismissed. It wasn't angry, it was heartfelt, and that made it historic. In Singapore, however, the film was refused release by the Board of Film Censors. Their explanation was that it contained sensitive social themes. The irony? Singapore had just begun, opening up its cinema market to international films, but Philadelphia was considered a step too far. Critics abroad called it a masterpiece of empathy. Audiences in Singapore who managed to watch bootleg copies said the film gave them words for feelings they couldn't express. Tom Hanks won the Academy Award for Best Actor, and Bruce Springsteen's Streets of Philadelphia became an anthem for understanding and kindness. Over time, the ban softened, and Philadelphia finally aired on cable decades later, but heavily edited. By then, the world had moved on. The film that Singapore once banned became a global symbol of awareness and compassion. Sometimes banning a movie doesn't erase it, it just postpones the impact until people are ready to hear it. Number 1. Maurice, 1987. India, Kenya, and Malaysia. It was elegance disguised as rebellion. When James Ivory's Maurice premiered in the late 1980s, audiences didn't expect a quiet British period drama to become a lightning rod for censorship. But beneath its refined setting and Oxford accents was a message that terrified authorities across continents: love without shame. Based on the novel by E.M. Forster, written in the 19-teens but kept secret until after his death, Maurice follows a young man in Edwardian England who discovers that happiness might lie outside society's rules. Starring Hugh Grant and James Wilby, the film portrayed affection not as tragedy, but as destiny. That was enough to get it banned or heavily restricted in countries like India, Kenya, and Malaysia, where censors declared it contrary to moral guidelines. In India, the film's distributor withdrew it before release, after state boards refused clearance. In Kenya, import permits were denied outright. And in Malaysia, screenings were canceled at the last minute, despite strong festival demand. Yet audiences still found ways to watch. Film clubs shared copies hand-to-hand, and critics praised it as the most tender rebellion ever filmed. What made Maurice so powerful wasn't shock, it was serenity. It showed that love could exist in sunlight, not just in secrecy. In a world obsessed with punishment, Maurice dared to end with two people choosing happiness. And that simple act of hope was what governments feared most. Today, the film stands as one of the earliest mainstream works to show queer love as natural, gentle, and human. Banned for its warmth, remembered for its grace, Maurice proved that dignity can be revolutionary, especially when it looks this calm. From silent glances to anthems of defiance, these films were banned not because they were dangerous, but because they dared to be honest. They showed that love, identity, and truth can't be contained by borders or censorship. And every time a screen goes dark, someone somewhere lights it back up. So which of these stories surprised you most? Tell us in the comments, and remember, the films that get banned today often become the ones that define tomorrow.